Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert with a special edition of the Listening Post. We're devoting this week's program to the media story in Turkey and Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's government. To say that Erdogan takes a hands-on approach with the Turkish media is to understate the case. He's been known to call news editors personally and demand changes to what he's seeing on the air. Those editors tend to grant his wishes, and then they complain about government intimidation. There's a new internet law in Turkey which gives the government the power to take down any online content it does not like without first having to go through the courts. The timing of that law, it passed just as some damaging corruption allegations surfaced on the net, has reinforced the suspicion held by many Turks that their government will use the law as a censorship tool. One of Erdogan's recurring themes is that Turkish journalists need to get on board with the government's program and spread the good news about its achievements. There are still plenty of news outlets loyal to Erdogan and his party, the AKP, particularly on the television side. And with local elections coming up in just a few weeks and a presidential round expected this August, the Prime Minister will be counting on those channels for some favorable coverage. In the second half of our program, an extended interview with one of the Prime Minister's former communications advisors at the AKP. But first, the Listening Post's Will Yong with the media story in Tayyip Erdogan's Turkey.
We've never had a prime minister who was as interested in media affairs as Mr. Erdogan. The prime minister has resorted to every imaginable pressure. You know, when we study the history of the Turkish press, Sultan Abdülhamid II was known for imposing an extremely strict censorship system. But I don't think even during his time, Sultan Abdülhamid became involved in media censorship to the extent that Mr. Erdogan has been.
Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan is a skilled media operator. He knows that in Turkey, as in any other country, taking on the media, sometimes even shooting the messenger, can be smart politics. And he crosses swords with the media repeatedly, whether it's over what he calls a lack of coverage of his government's achievements.
Bizim medyayla derdimiz var. Ya benim söylediğim bu ülkedeki hayırlı hizmetleri duyurun da millet duysun ya. Biz nereden nereye gidiyoruz bunu bilsin. Derdimiz bu.
Or the coverage of the government's conflict with Kurdish separatists.
Batsın senin bu gazeteciliğin. Ortaya dökülen iddialar, terörün bitmesini istemeyen, bize karşı çözüm istemeyen bu çevrelerin açık bir sabotajıdır.
And Erdogan is not above getting involved personally. He was in Morocco last year watching Haberturk TV's coverage of the Taksim protests in Istanbul when he called the channel's editor.
Fatih, bak şu anda ben yani buyurun başbakanım. Hatta
Erdogan took issue with one of the headlines on the news ticker. It was accurate, but he didn't like it. He wanted it changed.
Anlaşılmıştır efendim. Şimdi tamamdır. Ama anladım diyorsunuz da işte yani hayret ya böyle bir şeyde hala bunlar yani. Ne gerek var?
Haberturk zaten
Haberturk already follows a pro-government, pro-AKP line. Fatih Sarraj, who is very close to the Prime Minister, has been appointed to head this media group. The news editor of Haberturk also has a similar background. It's therefore impossible for BBC-style critical journalism to come out of such a media organization. However, as they are journalists, they do at least cover the opposition leaders' activities with a news ticker. There must be at least this much for a minimum level of journalism. But the government cannot stand even this much journalism.
You know, we always thought that some second-level advisor would call the newspaper or the TV station. Now we're finding out that, for instance, in this particular newspaper and television station, they had a very close associate of the Prime Minister implanted to do nothing but censorship. And that person was in fact receiving his instructions from no other than Mr. Prime Minister, having studied censorship of all kinds in Turkey all these years. This goes beyond my imagination.
Erdogan's influence in shaping the media today is not a new concept. In Turkey, every government that came and gone has tried to influence media outlets. Now, as far as Erdogan's concerned, he has suffered in the hands of the media outlets before he became Prime Minister. So when he came to power in 2002 elections, it's only natural for him to actually desire having media outlets that would output his ideas and his policies and speak his mind sometimes. So if you're going to evaluate it from this angle, it's by anybody's standards a normal thing to happen in Turkey. It's been happening since the foundation of the Republic.
That argument, that this has always been the Turkish way, would be fine if Turkey was content to stand still. But it's not. The Erdogan government says it wants to move the country forward by joining the European Union. The EU has rules for membership, including minimum standards on freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and they've been issues ever since Turkey first applied for full membership in 1987. Anti-terror legislation and laws that ban insults against quote-unquote Turkishness have been used against journalists and authors who have been critical of the government. And in February, a new law was passed, enabling the government to take down content from the internet without first taking the matter to the courts. The law was being processed just as damaging material was leaking online relating to a corruption scandal that has seen several cabinet ministers resign and some of their family members arrested.
This comes after the Graph probe became public and all the information is now flowing on the internet. So there's a strong speculation on the streets that the Prime Minister is taking all these measures because he wants to control the flow of information. That's going to hurt him. That's going to bring more ugly but real facts to daylight.
This isn't something all of a sudden government felt the need for it and put it into the parliament to pass through. It's been worked on for the last 2.5 years with a greater consultation from all aspects of the industry. And it came to the parliament before this so-called corruption scandal started. So you know the process that comes into the parliament. And now it's been debated and passed through so that people's privacy and a person's right to preservation of their privacy is protected.
Although the government claims this new bill is not about controlling content, not about limiting freedoms, that is a lie. With this new bill, the power to pull content offline has been taken away from the courts and given to the bureaucrats. Are they shutting down morally inappropriate content or content that is not favoured by the government? To be honest, I don't think the government is being sincere. I see this as an attempt to conquer the last fortress of the free and independent media.
The New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists counts more reporters in prison in Turkey than in any other country, ahead of China and Iran. Many were jailed over their reporting of the Kurdish separatist story, which is a delicate issue in Turkey, as evidenced by a meeting Prime Minister Erdogan called with news editors in October 2011, when fighting flared once again. Journalists who attended the 3-hour meeting have told the Listening Post that many of the reporters there didn't need much convincing, that some volunteered to go further than the government asked. Those editors know the Erdogan government has considerable leverage with their media owners, most of whom head huge conglomerates, and whose other business with the government makes far more money than their media outlets ever will.
You need to follow the money. It's always the money. You have to, follow how the media ownership gets favors. Sabah Media Group used to be known as a balanced media outlet, and there have been a lot of news about the way Sabah newspaper and Sabah Group have been bought by a number of businessmen who are close to Prime Minister. The government have allowed them free access and privilege.
The Doğuş Group is a major player in banking and tourism. The Çukurova Group is one of the biggest telecom operators, and they also own a petrol company and a bank. If you look at Çiner, they're in the mining business. When you put all of that together, they account for 60 to 70% of all TV ratings and newspaper circulation. Media investment in Turkey is the main issue. In Turkey, people blame the journalists for weak reporting, but it's the people who are focusing on money and their positions, the CEOs who don't want to lose power. They are the ones diluting the editorial content. The rest are their servants.
The Turkish media are largely shaped by media moguls and their economic interests, and they self-censor according to those interests. Therefore, to be honest, I don't look to the media for objective information. This is a fundamental issue in Turkey. The main problem is that there is no media, no press, whose sole aim is to inform the audience.
With Turkey's conglomerates providing a link between politics and the press, Erdogan's relations with big business will be crucial in what is an important election year. The AKP faces local government polls later this month, and if Erdogan decides to run for president in the August election, his political future could, to a large extent, be in the hands of his many allies or his growing number of enemies in Turkey's media.
Our Global Village Voices now on Prime Minister Erdogan's relationship with the Turkish news media.
As far as I know, Turkish press never was free, always controlled by the elite, few corporation. Since the Republic establishments, 1920s to up to this date. And it was always one-sided story. Secular, left-leaning, state defender, and big corporation mouthpiece. In the recent years, ever since the Erdogan became a power, he encouraged a different view on the media, which they can reflect the choice of the Turkish people.
Media companies always had political economic ties with the governments. These unholy alliances, so to speak, became the norm in the 1990s when business tycoons started acquiring television channels or newspapers to use them as bargaining tools with the government for state bids or privatization deals, which of course made them very vulnerable to government manipulation.
Usually, when a politician takes issue with news coverage, they don't get on the phone themselves, as Tayyip Erdogan is wont to do, and chew out a few editors. They have people who take care of that. Media spokespeople, advisors, strategists. That was Akif Beki's job under Erdogan over a 4-year period. Beki was a television journalist before trading the studio for the official corridors of power in Ankara and then returning to journalism. He now writes a political column in a newspaper called Hürriyet. Beki rejects the notion that Turkey's prime minister is no supporter of freedom of the press and is edging in the direction of the sultans of the old Ottoman Empire. He says that Tayyip Erdogan is a Democrat. I spoke with Akif Beki in Istanbul about Erdogan, the new internet law, the structural problems in the media there, and what he calls the Turkish way. Akif Beki, thanks for joining us here on the Listening Post today.
Thank you for having me.
You go a long way back with Tayyip Erdogan. As a leader, compared to other government leaders, he strikes me as being more direct in his involvement with the media. What is it in his background, do you think, that makes him this way?
I don't think that it has anything to do with his background at all, actually. Maybe my answer is going to disappoint you, but as I said, it is not unique to him. It is, to a certain extent, just the Turkish way. I mean, it has to do with media power, media-politician relations in Turkey.
On the new internet law, which you support, you recently wrote, internet liberalism has reached a new level. All countries have got to deal with this issue. All leaders occasionally have things written about them or nasty things said about them on Twitter, on Facebook, or what have you. What is it about Turkey that it feels it needs to go further than other countries in shutting that down by taking the courts out of the equation and leaving it up to the bureaucrats to take down that content?
Let me put it this way. Individuals have the right to get their personal privacy and their personality, personal integrity protected by legal system, by the rule of law. We had problems in this regard. So there was a need for such a regulation, for a new regulation on the internet. It takes 6 to 8 days to get a decision out from the court. So it is too late. I mean, once abusive content is circulated in the internet, once everyone viewed it, then it is too late to protect personal privacy. It is too late.
That's not the view of the EU. The Speaker of the EU Parliament says that this is a time where Turkey needs more transparency, more freedom of expression, yet the country's going in the other direction.
You know, the key word is transparency here. And I don't get the point. We are talking of an abusive content and protection of the need to protect personal privacy.
Okay, well, here's the point. Can we talk about the Mahir Zeynalov case? People on the outside were looking into Turkey, seeing a new internet law, seeing a journalist deported. Someone we interviewed said even the shepherd in the mountain knows that it wasn't a visa issue that led the government to deport Zeynalov. It was about his tweets. So why even pretend? Because Turks aren't stupid. Turks know what's happening. So why even make this about a visa if your problem is what he's tweeting or what he's covering?
So you are sure that he is not deported for visa?
No, I'm saying that that's the reason being given. When's the last time you heard of a journalist being deported from Turkey when his visa expired? You know, when the government says it's for that technical reason as opposed to what is obvious to everybody, then Ankara begins to sound like Beijing or Moscow. Is that really who you want to be keeping company with while you're applying to the EU for membership?
In this case, is his visa expired or not? Was he deported on the very same day, on the exact day and date that his visa expired, or a month later?
I don't know. Because I don't think it's the reason that I don't know is because, like most Turks, I don't think it has anything to do with his visa. I think it has everything to do with what he's tweeting. This is the only journalist that I know of who the Prime Minister has brought a personal criminal complaint against, that I know of. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then
I am not aware of it. I'm hearing it first time.
Well, he brought a personal criminal complaint against him, and then that is the journalist who is deported because his visa has expired. And this is a coincidence.
If Prime Minister feels that his personal integrity or personality has been attacked, then he has the right to take it to the court, take the issue to the court. But I am not aware of it at all, whether this is the case with Mr. Zeynalov or not. What I do know is his visa has been expired, and you know, this is the fact on the ground. No one denies it, even Mr. Zeynalov, and I don't think that anyone suggests that, you know, government could overlook expiration of visa. It is their problem. Let them speak about it. I'm not in their place to defend or confess anything.
Sure, I understand, but you know how media works in Turkey.
Yeah,
but you know how media works in Turkey because you worked in the office of the Prime Minister on the communication side, so you know how it works. On the mainstream media, we saw last summer during the Taksim protests that they were just down the road in Istanbul, but CNN Turk has got a documentary about penguins in Antarctica on the air, which really seemed to take the Turkish media problem to the absurd, because the Latin expression is reductio ad absurdum, reduce the Turkish media problem to a position of absurdity. If you're sitting at home,
question is
the question is this:
full of stereotypes, cliches, stereotypes. Well, unbelievable.
I didn't put the penguins on the air.
Okay, what is wrong with putting penguins on the air?
When you have tear gas on the streets of Istanbul and demonstrators on the streets of Istanbul?
You don't. When there is tear gas on the street of London, then do you air tear gas 24 hours around the clock?
When the London riots occurred a couple of summers ago, wall-to-wall coverage from the beginning that just got bigger. There were no penguins, there were no nature documentaries, but what I say doesn't matter. What matters is the Turks, thousands of them, descending in front of news channels like NTV, demonstrating in front of NTV and Haberturk TV, saying, you've got to cover this country. You know, and what happened was that the head of news at NTV, Cem Aydin, came out on day 3, and he said, you're right, we haven't done the job, we have to do better. Now, he's no longer in his position. Do you think he's out because NTV failed to do its job initially, or because he admitted it publicly and the owners didn't like it?
Why don't you put this question, put this pretty good question to him in person.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you agree with those people in Turkey who say that the problem with Turkish media is structural? That these mega conglomerates that have big contracts with governments, that there is a conflict of interest, and that they will never be as critical of the people they're doing business with and who are writing them the checks as normal news organizations would be in any democracy?
It is not unique to this media group, it is not unique to this government, it is not unique to this country, it is the same everywhere.
No, it's not the same everywhere.
It is.
It occurs everywhere, but doesn't happen to the same degree everywhere.
Okay, let's say we can discuss only the degree of difference between here and anywhere else. Correct? Yes. Okay. Now, so let's put it correctly. Owners might have their own causes to support any government, or to try to get along with governments in good terms, or to take positions against
No, just cover the news.
governments.
Just cover the news. Not take a position against, just cover the news.
Or
play it straight.
Or just cover the news, as you put it.
Play it straight.
Yeah.
Down the middle.
It is not that straight. It is not that clear cut anywhere in the world.
No, but
anywhere
we do our
It
best.
is not that clear cut. I mean, come on. You are talking about transparency, and your thoughts and words also should be transparent.
That you wrote in a column that when it comes to ideology and broadcasting, media, that I prefer an honest taking of sides to a double crossing by pretending to be neutral.
Definitely, yes.
Is that really the way forward for the media in Turkey or in any country?
I would prefer it this way. Don't cheat your reader or audience.
Don't pretend to be something
clear.
you're not.
Don't pretend to be someone else.
So the same thing that other countries allow in print, you think should be allowed on television?
Yeah, I have written this before many times. Let the audience know about your orientation.
Here's my final question. You said that when in opposition, the AKP had to deal with media that was pro-government, and the government back then was calling editors the same way that Erdogan is calling editors now, or his people are calling editors now. Does the AKP not run the risk that one day it will again find itself in opposition, and that it will have wished at that point that it did fix this? I call it a structural problem, call it an ideological problem, call it a content problem. And they're going to be on the outside looking in, trying to phone those news organizations, and nobody's taking Erdogan's call.
This is the point to be focused on. I said, it is not something new. It is not unique to Mr. Erdogan or this government. It is business as usual in Turkish media power, media government relations. But I did not mean that I do support it this way. I don't think that this is the right way to handle media relations for any government. This is wrong and got to be changed.
How do you do it?
It needs a change in mindsets. It is not just about laws, regulations. It is not about legal procedures. It is about mindsets. But it is not only the government to be blamed for it. It's not the owners either. Journalists, editorial staff.
Yeah, but they take their orders from their owners.
Is also to be kept responsible for the outcome in the end of the day. We have to have a self-criticism as well. We have to develop a kind of self-criticism, because we are also responsible for the outcome, for the final outcome. It is not good. It's not good for any party. It's not serving to benefits of any party, not to the benefits of, to the interests of owners, not to the interests of journalists, not to the interests of even governments.
Akif Beki, thanks for speaking to us at the Listening Post today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been watching a special edition of the Listening Post on the media in Turkey. Next week, another special. We'll bring you 3 stories on how new technologies are changing what you see in the news. We'll see you then here at the Listening Post.